It assesses and compares institutional change as the underpinning feature of economic dynamism. But really, we are interested here in the structural changes that bring about innovation, socio-political systems, sustainable economic development. And when we look at economic performance, it's not just economic indicators that we look at. We are looking very much so at socio-political factors. We even try and bring cultural features into this. We look at issues like aid and the role of aid in economies, and maybe perhaps how economies are weaning themselves off aid and becoming more reliant on other forms of capital to drive economic growth and development. So those are very, very important, and there is a clear need in the world to do this. The index covers 144 countries. Now, if you look at other indices and if you look through the report, there are other indices that we've used that we refer to, sometimes that we might criticize in some other forms that are almost as comprehensive as this. But what is very, very important, of those 144 countries, 39 of them are from Africa, which is probably the most comprehensive economic index on Africa at this stage that uses hard empirical data. I must keep on mentioning the hard empirical data because many of the indices use survey-based data. The first one is open and connected. So that looks at the openness and the connectedness of a country, and that's both internal and external. So it's the connectedness within the country, within the economy, and within the region, the sub-region, and within the world. Then we have a look at red tape, which is predominantly, I would argue, around issues of corruption. Very, very important and very relevant at this stage of our development here in this country. Socio-political stability, that's obviously a key area that we look at as well, because that informs the economic stability of a country and how we are moving forward. The justice system, made up of a whole range of variables. Macroeconomic management, which does include as well the dependency on aid. And then human capital. Now, human capital is an interesting one because we don't simply look at this much vaunted demographic dividend that everybody talks about. If you remember about 4 or 5 years ago, there was some reference to lions and all the rest of it about this burgeoning middle class and the lions on the move. What we're looking at here is beyond just a demographic dividend. It doesn't matter, or it does matter, that we're going to have populations of around 50 million people in some countries that are the size of Lesotho within the next 50 years. We want to know what we are doing with that human capital that is coming in. But to look beyond categorizing of countries, we want to understand the inner workings of these markets. We want to understand what actually is going on and to build that deeper understanding of what is driving these markets. So it's a better understanding and to avoid broad generalizations. Unfortunately, we have been trapped in the last 20 to 30 years in these broad generalizations of calling markets, referring to markets, anything from Ghana to Singapore to South Africa as emerging markets. These are markets that are clearly and very, very widely dispersed and very, very different. They've got very, very different characteristics. They've got very, very different growth rates and very, very different trajectories. And I think there's a need now more than ever to understand these markets the way we are doing through this index and looking at institutions in particular. So these are the raw scores. These, while they are important because those are the fast movers, but you can actually see just over that period of time, these guys here performed very badly. I actually personally, as an academic, am very, very interested in these because I want to know why they have gone wrong or what they have done to go so badly wrong. And you can actually see some of these. Venezuela, we see what's happening right now with the departure, perhaps, or let's hope so, of Nicolas Maduro. And this was also obviously at the period of time of Hugo Chavez and all the rest. And that's what's informed that. Argentina, as we know, was one of the worst performing countries, or I hope that they're going to migrate from assuming that title that Brazil always held as the country of the future, and it always will be. But and then others like Syria. But as I say, and you're going to see this now in the results, that Argentina made some dramatic changes at the end of last year, which will be very, very interesting for us to look at in subsequent indices as we go forward. And these are the fast-moving ones, and I think I must re-emphasize this. The base level of those is so low that if they didn't move forward at a rapid pace, there would be a serious problem. And that's what we're seeing right now in Africa, is that there's a number of these countries that are of such a low base, and they're not moving quickly enough. And the result is going to be literally population growth rates that exceed economic growth and development, which is going to be very, very bad for this Africa rising narrative that we've heard so much about over the last 5 years. The base score is crucial for our measure. That's one of the distinguishing features of the DMI. Besides just this average every 2 years, is the fact that it starts on a base and it's not a snapshot look at the numbers. It's a measure over a period of time. But it's a more realistic application for a comparative understanding. I think that's one of the things that we're also obsessed with, is comparative analyses or comparisons between markets. And that's what we really go for with using that base level. We divide this up into different buckets, really: catch-up markets, dynamic markets, adynamic markets, and static markets. I think I should also point out at this stage is when you achieve, as a country, if we are each countries, when you achieve dynamic market status, there's nothing that suggests that you will stay there. You have to constantly work to improve and to make sure, because it's all relative. It's relative to all other markets around the world. And you have to constantly work to improve that, to maintain your dynamic market status. So there were countries that were dynamic markets in the past that are no longer there. There were countries that were catch-up markets that have now regressed into adynamic markets and all the rest. The base level is imperative for all of that. And the high rate of change may be off a very low base, as I mentioned. Those are the results, but just a quick overview of these. The green ones here are the dynamic markets. The yellow ones are the catch-up markets. Orange, static markets. Red, adynamic. As a kind of, as just a suggestion here, or just an overview, 31 of the 144 countries that were measured, 31 of them are dynamic. A very small number, if you think about it. That's 29%, or nearly, let's say 30%, close to 30% are catch-up. That's pretty good. But unfortunately, nearly 50% of the countries that were measured, of the 144 countries that we measured, were either static or they regressed over that period of time. That means the institutions did very little to improve, or they actually went backward. And that is important, because that, in my mind, suggests that the global political economy over that period of time, certainly up to 2014, has not made a significant or even a moderate recovery since the global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. We saw rapid growth rates in many of the emerging markets around 2008 to 2014, maybe 2013, and it would suggest then that that might have been off a moderately low base. It might have been it might have been just a rebound off the global financial crisis, or capital going to other places, or it could have also been something off the commodity booms. But basically, over that period of time, and that's one of the things that I think is quite relevant, is that it looks like the global political economy hasn't recovered. And what is very, very important here is that our results are informed very much by what happened over that period of time. And then finally, South Africa, as we know, and as we are seeing, especially this week, we are trapped in a state of stasis. And this is a stage that we have been trapped in, according to our previous index as well, for literally the last 10 years. We emerged out of a period of high confidence, and there was very, very high levels of business confidence back in about 2006 to 2008, and we have really just slipped from there. But we've come off a very high institutional base. South Africa was, not only by African standards, but on around the emerging world, had some of the most established and strongest institutions of all those so-called emerging markets. That has been slowly but surely, it hasn't regressed, but has been eroded over this period of time, and we've seen this, and we see this in the numbers.